So, if you're new here, what we like to do is a recap before we launch into our full discussion of the episode. We cut that out, post it on YouTube for your viewing convenience, and if you want to see our full discussion, that will be linked down in the description of that recap video. So check that out if you're interested. But without further ado, this is episode 27, The Agenda. So we pick up with Marara sitting on the throne up at the top of this chamber where there are 5 thrones where this conclave will happen. And she has just called for the meeting to begin. That was how the previous episode ended. So we cut to Ame, and the first thing she does is cast Calm Emotions to kind of help settle everyone and says, it's all going to be okay. Like, we got this. Meanwhile, Grimoire,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. I might need help on some of these names.
Yeah.
I looked for the transcript and it wasn't out yet, so this is just my best approximation. But she slowly leads Hikaya into the chamber, and Ame gives her friends a quick rundown on who all of her sisters of the coven are. So she says Marara represents entropy and darkness, Hikaya, growth and creation, Grimoire is conflict, destruction, death, and Indri represents the self, solitude. And I, of course, represent bringing together all of the things the world wishes to separate. Suvi does an insight check on Ame to see how she's feeling, and she can tell that she's not scared. She just really wants to make Grandmother Ren proud. So Suvi casts Enhance Ability on her. Fox is cunning, which gives her advantage on intelligence checks for the next hour. But Brennan reminds Erika that she actually has exhaustion, so she's going to have disadvantage on everything, but this will cancel that out for intelligence checks at least. So the fox then leaps into Ame's arms, and they too walk into the room, and the doors close behind them. Outside though, Ursulon decides to go have a word with the wolf guy that wanted to fight him earlier. So he approaches him and introduces himself, and here's where I may get the names wrong, but the wolf spirit's name is Heinrul, and we also find out this firefly spirit's name is Badze, and finally the tree spirit's name is Socorro. So Heinrul asks how strong Ursulon is, and he says, well, some say I'm the strongest man in Silbury. And so Heinrul's like, well, let's wrestle. So Ursulon takes off his shield and kind of prepares and says, have at me, and dude just goes straight at it. So we have competing athletics checks, 21 from Ursulon, but a 23 from Heinrul. So Heinrul takes him down, snarls, and basically has his open mouth at his throat, basically taking him down, and Ursulon yields. So Heinrul then says, well, what if we wrestled again, this time for stakes? What would you want? And Ursulon says, how about a boon? And Heinrul says, well, if I win, I want to kill you. So Ursulon's like, is there anything else? And he's like, okay, how about a favor? If I win, you will come and drink with me in my chambers until all the liquor is gone and we're sick, basically. And Ursulon says, yeah, those team terms are more agreeable. And basically, as soon as those words leave his lips, Heinrul leaps at him again. Another contested check, but 22-7 this time. So Ursulon just gets embarrassed, basically. And Heinrul smells Ursulon and says, the comforts of mortals have made you soft. I will see you in my chambers, and we will drink until we are sick. Badze then asks if Ursulon likes riddles, and he's like, yeah, I like riddles. And Suvi is like, oh no. And basically that's when we cut to back inside this chamber where the meeting is taking place, if you want to take it from there.
Yeah. So as the meeting begins, there is some usual formalities you might expect. And they essentially ask Ame to give a report on the status of the World's Heart. It's sort of like, hey, tell us, how is the World's Heart doing? Ame then, I think this was, and I'm very sorry, I think this was Eric maybe in our Discord who gave this analogy of giving a book report for the wrong book. Very much what then happens. Ame begins talking about the status of the World's Heart. She starts sharing about her concern about the man in black, the stranger in the night. She talks about how, there is just a lot of unrest and uneasiness around her station. And no more than a few minutes into her, what she thinks is giving the report, I think it's Grimoire is immediately basically shouting at her, being like, you know, why are you talking about this kind of stuff? Like, why are you? And Ame then trying to like persuade them to listen to her, begins basically being like, well, you know, my station's being impacted by y'all's stations. Like this man in black, he's obviously involved in, I think it turns to Marara and is like, I think would be part of your domain. And what's happening in my domain is likely affecting yours as well. This does not convince them to be like, oh, you're right, go ahead. Instead, it is very much like a blow to their ego. And there is sort of like this, how dare you come here and supposed to know what's best for our domains rather than we would ourselves. Indri tries to help out and is basically like, you know, Ame, are you basically saying like you're trying to give the report and you're trying to share that these other domains are sort of like touching what you're experiencing? And she's like, yes, that's what I'm trying to get at. Marara jumps in, and I think this is when Ame actually turns to Marara and is like, you know, are you familiar with the man in black? And Marara was like, you know, are you asking me a question? And Ame's like, yeah. And Marara basically like grunts at her and is like, basically, I think you're done with your report. I think you've exhausted your good faith here. And turns to the other witches and is like, this witch of the world's heart is clearly not ready, clearly not prepared. Grandmother Rin, there's like a comment about Grandmother Rin like following in suit of her predecessor, but it's not given much more insight. And then Ame actually tries to defend Grandmother Rin and is like, Grandmother Rin was the truest witch I'd ever known. I'm sure all of you and all of your wisdom would recognize this too, that she was like this amazing person. And then Hakeya basically says, no, I never noticed that. Like just this really like, it's just not a very friendly meeting that's happening. Indri again tries to help and basically says, you know, Ame, are you saying that because of the nature of the world right now, that the world's heart isn't quite fitting in correctly? Like, is it because like things are in disarray that its position is in like disjunction with like other things? And Ame says like, yes, that's what I'm trying to get at. And then Marara is like, okay, well, in that case, I want to basically file a motion for us to kill Ame and destroy her station, since she just said that the world's heart doesn't fit here. And it's very much a like, no, but not like that. I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
Grimoire is all for it and is like, yep, let's kill her. Hakeya actually, I think to Ame's surprise, is like, well, let's not rush into this. Let's take the day to rest, and then tomorrow we can add it as part of our agenda. And there's a line from Indri that's like, hey, don't worry, Ame. We're only going to kill you if we feel like it's the best thing for like the world, you know? And it's like, thanks. The meeting basically comes to a close. Hakeya like falls forward into like a bed of flowers, like of moss that she creates, and disappears. And it also removes the drowsiness from Ame, which was the wisdom save that she had failed earlier. And Ame is trying to get a feel for like who's still in the chamber. She actually goes to Grimoire and is basically like, hey, what's your problem with me? Like, what's your deal? And Grimoire gets in her face and is like, you speak too much of the dead. My biggest problem with you is that you're slow, and is basically saying like you're too weak to be part of this coven. Grimoire takes her leave. Marara is gone also. And then Indri kind of like politely works her way around the moss that is in the chambers, and effectively leaves Ame by herself in this now ended meeting with the fox at her side. So do you want to wrap us up from there?
Yeah. So Ame is alone in this chamber, and she and the fox have a convo, and he's basically like, we should just run. Like, nobody can catch me. Let's just run and hide, and then we'll be safe. And she's like, well, you can go if you want. Like, you can run, but I'm not going to. And he says, well, I don't want to do that. And you know, the implication is that he doesn't want to abandon her, but he says it's because he wouldn't know how to get back if she wasn't with him. And he says, plus, I still have more time to convince you to run anyway. So they make a little bet where Ame bets he won't convince her to run, and they're going to bet fish slurry on it. So Ame then asks the fox to go see if he can go find anything out about the other witches, like go explore and sleuth around. So we cut actually a little bit of a flashback to what was happening outside of the meeting while it was going on. And Badze, who had asked Ursulon if he liked riddles, asks him, "What always runs but never walks, often murmurs but never talks, has a bed but never sleeps, an open mouth but never eats?" And Ursulon says, "Is it a river?" And Badze applauds. And so he got it right. And this is basically when the doors open and these witches start stalking out. So everyone basically leaves until it's just Ame's retinue that's outside. And Ame steps out of the chamber to speak with them and says, "Hey, we need to go somewhere to talk, like somewhere private." And Ursulon's like, "Hey, yeah, like I'm good for now, but just so you know, I lost a bet and I have to go get drunk this evening." Um, so we then cut to the keep of the world's heart where Ame is staying. And she tells them that they want to eliminate her and her station. And Ame tries to remember at this point some of the other members of the conclave that Rin told her about in the past, and remembers two previous witches that are no longer part of it. The watch, or excuse me, the witch of the watching fire and the witch of the wide sea. Um, so she's trying to remember any conversations that she might have had with Rin about the coven and those types of things. And based on her check, Brennan tells her that Eruna, the witch of the wide sea, was beautiful and wise and very close with Hekea. And those two plus Grimoire were kind of like one group. And then Scaldi, the witch of the watching fire, was closest with Indri and grandmother Rin. So those three were another group. And then Marara was alone in the center. So they're kind of two cliques and then Marara. So Iruna died of old age and didn't have a successor because she waited too long. But what happened with Scaldi is that she had an apprentice that betrayed her. So something happened, maybe related to the betrayal, maybe not. But in any case, when Scaldi died, the apprentice had removed themselves from succession. So that station basically went away. Ame tells them all of this, and that even originally there were 13 witches in the coven, and Suvi says, "Well, I think the answer lies in the fact that you guys always argue. So if they take you out, there's only four of them left, and there's no tiebreaker anymore. Like, so they're going to be stuck. So they basically have to remove two witches to continue on. And in the same way, the last two witches, Iruna and Scaldi, were actually kind of opposites. In that one was the sea, one was fire. So maybe Ame, if you argue that your opposite will also have to leave, then that can maybe save you." And Ame's like, "Well, I can really make a case for any of them to be my opposite." And it's at this point that they remember the words of the wizard Sly, who basically told her that her best chance here was to use this defense, saying, "You can't get rid of me without getting rid of somebody else." So it doesn't fall on Ame to choose a specific sister of hers to try and eliminate with her. All she needs to do is bring up that someone has to go and then let all of them argue about it. Like that's going to be the best way. So while this conversation is happening, from time to time, the fox is checking in with Ame via their telepathic bond and telling her what he finds. And most of it is innocuous. He's like, "I found a hallway." And she's like, "Keep going." But during one of the check-ins, he actually sees Indri and Marara kind of having a confrontation with Indri basically having backed up Marara like to a wall and like pointing a finger in her face. And they're too far away for the fox to hear it, but Ame like kind of shares his vision, and since she can read lips, she can pick up parts of this conversation. However, because Marara wears a mask, she can't hear Marara's side, only Indri's side. And Indri is absolutely livid. And so what Ame can pick up is this. Indri says, "Give you any pause at all? Perhaps when Rin gave her some warning, or, she came." Oh, excuse me, I skipped a bit. She says, "Give you any pause at all?" Obviously, she had some idea. It caught her not at all by surprise. Then something from Aurora we can't hear. And who can say? Perhaps Rin gave her some warning, or, she's come with those Citadel wizards. So maybe again, something Marar says. And then Indri says, "Yes, my sister, of course. Their tricks were paltry 100 years ago, paltry 50 years ago, 20 years ago. but every so often I look back and their tricks keep getting better. I think your entire point is that time is running out. Whether from the Citadel or from the cottage, Ame has some knowledge about this. And your impatience and your disdain for the requirements from our sister Hakaya saw this opportunity lost. So think more in the future, not solely in your own domain, but of all of ours. And so Indri, finishes scolding her and turns and walks away. And Ame is like, yo, Fox, follow Indri. So back in the room, Ame comes back too, and she basically kind of gives the nod to Suvi to be like, "Hey, I think can you check if there's anything like listening in on us?" And so Suvi casts detect magic, and she can sense that something in the room is like spying on them, but she doesn't roll high enough to pinpoint what it is. Um, so they kind of know they're being listened in onto, but they can't do anything about it. But then since Suvi gleaned this, she kind of writes down on a page and like passes it to Ame to tells her this. And Ursulon writes on the page and says, if it was gone, would you be able to tell? And Suvi nods. And so Ursulon then grabs Suvi's scarf and throws it out the window. And the eavesdropping goes away. And Brennan says, Lou, you stone cold got me, and just ends the episode right there. So that was the end of episode 27. Again, the agenda. And if you're looking for our full discussion, you will be able to find it linked down in the description below.